Hi, folks. We're continuing on with module number 8, Reconstruction. Um, we just saw in our last unit attempts to guarantee rights and equality for African American, and that was a key element of Reconstruction, particularly Congress's plans for Reconstruction. But here in part 3, we're going to see resistance to this goal and the ultimate failure of Reconstruction. All of the new measures and requirements under congressional Reconstruction are going to outrage white Southern Democrats. Their own loss of political power coincides with rising fortunes for former slaves. So we're going to see Southern whites resorting to terror campaigns to try to regain control. They're going to form groups like the Ku Klux Klan and use violence and intimidation to try to restore white supremacy and rule by the Democratic Party in the South. Klansmen are going to target certain members of the African American community. So a lot of times these attacks were not random attacks. They're specifically going after people who are successful, whether they're economically successful or they're someone who's seen as a leader within the Black community. The Klan is trying to tear those folks down. They're targeting people who are politically active, people who belong to the Republican Party or who exercise their political rights to vote. The Klan is trying to eliminate that. They even will attack African Americans for arguing with employers or refusing to work for certain people, or just for being too successful. There's a whole range of reasons here why the Klan might target someone. In the early 1870s, the federal government is finally going to crack down on the Klan. There's going to be some arrests. There's going to be some trials of Klansmen, although not nearly on the level that there should be, given the level of violence that had been taking place. And as a result, some of the Klan violence dissipates. But it's become clear that the only reason this happens is because of federal enforcement. State and local officials are either unwilling or unable to step in to protect African American rights. It shows that only federal intervention can actually protect African American rights. And the reason this is a problem is that by the mid-1870s, even federal officials are becoming unwilling to take action. The Northern public, people up north are getting tired of Reconstruction. They're saying, how long is this going to go on? Reconstruction's gone on now for twice as long as the war did. It's been nearly 10 years. When is this going to be over? Because we got problems of our own to deal with up north. We've got massive waves of immigration. We've got labor unrest. We've got our own problems that we need to deal with, and we need to, just give up on this crusade for African American rights and equality. So Northerners are starting to lose their will to continue this fight. And the political outlook has also shifted by the 1870s. During and immediately after the Civil War, the Republican Party actually favored federal activism. They supported government programs and government intervention to protect African American civil rights and to ensure equality. But by the 1870s, radical Republicans have lost their influence and the political climate has shifted. It's moved in the opposite direction towards the idea of laissez-faire, that the government should really stay out of these kinds of matters. And the support for government activism has really fallen off. None of these developments really favors continued federal support for Reconstruction. So the fact that Southern whites are launching this resistance campaign, the Northern white public is getting tired of this quest for Black rights, and then your political outlook has kind of shifted in a different direction too. This whole situation culminates with the presidential election of 1876. The Democratic candidate, a guy named Samuel Tilden, wins in the South, but the results are contested in 3 Southern states, Florida, Louisiana, and I forget what the third one is. Without those electoral votes, Tilden can't win the election. Well, Congress appoints a commission to investigate and to determine who actually won, and that commission comes back and reports along party lines that it's not Tilden, it's actually the Republican candidate, a guy named Rutherford Hayes, who's won the election. Well, Democrats are furious. They're screaming fraud, they're screaming stolen election, they are just frothing at the mouth mad. But they say they're willing to get over it, and they're willing to accept the Republican Hayes being named president if he will agree to pull those remaining troops out of the South. This is a deal that becomes known as the Compromise of 1877. In return for being elected and recognized as president, Hayes agrees to withdraw those federal troops from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. Here in the slide, you see a cartoon that's actually very critical of this decision. So we see Hayes here in the suit going off into the bushes to have his way with the Solid South. And the implication here is that he sold his soul to the devil so that he can have this political outcome. Hayes had been a Union officer during the Civil War. He was a Republican. He had supported the idea of African American rights. And yet here he is making a deal that is effectively going to spell the end of that. Once those troops are gone, this really marks the end to federal Reconstruction efforts, because there is now no mechanism in the South to protect African American rights and African American voters. And so white Democrats in the South are going to seize on this, and they're going to seize this moment to reclaim power for themselves.